All right. Well, we will call the meeting to order. I know we're running a little bit behind, so we'll try to make up some ground here. The March 4th quarterly meeting of the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing. So we'll start with the public comment period. Mark, do we have anyone who is wishing to make public comment?
I'm not aware of anyone who signed up, but I'll ask Ryan or Christy to indicate if they have.
I don't think we had anybody signed up, but if anybody wishes to speak and they can raise their hand, we can call on you. And I am not seeing anyone, so.
Okay. All right, no problem. Thank you for that. We'll move on to approval of the minutes from the December 10th commission meeting. I know Mark sent them out to everybody. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Judge Tucker, is there a second?
Second.
That's Senator Street, it sounds like. Are there any negative votes? All right, hearing none, the minutes are approved. Moving on to the executive, administrative, and financial section. Mark or Professor Mystic, I don't know who.
Sure, I'll start, hit a couple of initial issues, and then we'll eventually get around to elections with Professor Mystic. The first agenda item is recognition of Representative Joanna McClinton. Representative McClinton was a member of the commission and recently resigned due to her election by her caucus as leader of the Democratic caucus in the House. And so I'm pleased to turn it back to the chairman to recognize the leader. And I see on the screen we have the virtual plaque for presentation.
Well, it certainly is bittersweet, Representative McClinton. It's been great, great working with you on the commission, and you know, it's been really a pleasure working with you on these criminal justice issues over the last several years. And I look forward to continuing to work with you in your new role as leader over in the House, and certainly appreciate all the work that you've done, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to continue working with you on these important issues. You bring a much needed perspective and a lot of energy to the discussion and the conversation about criminal justice issues. So I appreciate that very much. I did also want to just open up to the floor if anybody else would like to make a comment for now leader McClinton. Anyone else? Senator Street, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank the leader for her work on this commission. We're going to miss you on the commission, but certainly excited about the work that you're going to be doing, leading the House Democratic Caucus and helping to make the kinds of systemic changes for Pennsylvania that we all know are in the best interest. And certainly, so a loss for this commission is a gain for the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thank you, leader.
Judge Bernstein.
Representative McClinton, you're killing me. I'm going to miss you. So I'm super proud of you, and I wish you very well. Thank you, obviously, on behalf of just myself and the commission for everything that you've done, and great optimism for all you'll do. But on a personal note, very sad. So good luck to you.
Anybody
I also
else?
want to congratulate Representative McClinton. Been privileged and honored to work with her over the years, even before my time on the commission, and congratulate her on her ascension to leadership, and look forward to working with her in the future, even though, as everyone said, we will miss her here, and remind her that she's in my county a fair amount of the time, so I'll be keeping an eye on her.
All right. Judge, anybody else want to comment?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Judge Tucker.
yeah. I just wanted to again echo what everyone has said, and wish her Godspeed and the things that she's doing. She's always been a leader. Philadelphia really appreciates the thing that she's doing and continue to do, and we look forward to seeing her in her leadership capacity. Thank you.
All right.
And Mr. Chairman, I too would like to join the others in congratulating Representative McClinton in her leadership position in the House, and wish her well.
Thanks, Judge. Appreciate that. All right. Well, Representative McClinton, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to say.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to thank you for your passion and your hard work, your leadership. I'm so glad that you're at the helm. I know you're very thoughtful, always prepared, and set a high bar for service on the commission. And of course, to Mark Bergstrom and his dynamic staff who always work so hard. I have to just be frank and tell you all that as a young lawyer at the Public Defender's Office with the huge sentencing guidelines that I was in and out and remembering so many different parts of it, I literally never would have thought that one day I'd be on the commission. It's not laughable. It was a true honor, and I was hoping to be, like Frank and give it 2 decades, but I'm not as lucky. Not as lucky as Frank, and able to do it for this long. Unbeknownst to all of us, unfortunately, Frank, is still a tremendous person, but his district went a totally different way, and I'm just humbled that my colleagues, respected and cared for the future of our caucus enough to give any woman an opportunity. And the fact that it's me, it's just truly humbling and keeps me working hard and making every effort to not only amplify their voices, but issues like criminal justice that are so significant to our society and our world today. Although I'm sad to not be there quarterly. If I ever show up in Penn State, Kathy, don't act like you don't know me. If you see me in the knit me in, and you all happen to be having dinner and Rick told me, don't think it's weird, just embrace it. Because I will miss all of you, Professor Mystic, so many of you, and the ones even that retired in the last year or so. It's just been great. It's been wonderful to learn, to listen, and to give my feedback on behalf of not just my constituents, but my whole caucus. And I'm so excited that we have someone who's equally as passionate, if not more, in Representative Krajewski, who's going to be thoughtful, who's going to listen, going to learn and contribute to the discussion so that we can have the best outcome for individuals who end up getting convicted by judges or juries. We want them to have a fair outcome at the end. And I know that you all do so much work, but I'm not going to talk and talk. You have a whole agenda. But thank you for this honor. I'm so grateful, and I'm so appreciative that Leader Dermody gave me the opportunity to serve. And when he was trying to go a different direction two years ago, I said, do you want to replace me with another former public defender? And he was like, well, no, you're the only one in the caucus. I said, well, exactly. So that means I get another 2 years. But of course, now that I'm leader, I can't do everything. God knows I'm like in between meetings right now, but thank you all. I appreciate it. And I know that we're continuing to work together, not in this specific role for me, but we will continue to work together. So thank you for this honor.
Thanks.
All right. And Mark, I guess in this Zoom world, what are you gonna do? Mail her her plaque or what? What's
Diane has it at the Harrisburg office, so we will actually, after this meeting, be dropping it off at the leader's office. So so you see it virtually there. It will be a concrete representation later today. So thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
And moving on the agenda, one of Leader McClinton's early actions then was to appoint her successor. So I just wanted to note Representative Krajewski was on the policy meeting this morning. He's with us now, and the information, his background is in the meeting materials. But we welcome you. Look forward to having you work with the commission for the balance of the term and hopefully future terms.
Yeah, hopefully so. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to everyone in the commission for giving me the opportunity to serve with you, and especially to Leader McClinton for entrusting me with her position. It's clear from the work that I've observed, heard you, and also from all of your testimonies that Leader McClinton has really left a mark in this commission and will continue to leave a mark in her role as leader. So I hope that I can fill the very big shoes that she left for me to step into, and hope that I can do right by the people in our Commonwealth. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Great. And then the next thing is ex officio agency updates. If the Department of Corrections or the board would like to make any comments. I see Chairman Johnson's listing there. Just wanted to provide that opportunity if either agency wanted to make any comments. All right. I think then we'll move on. The next issue is the election of chair and vice chair for the 21-22 session. I'll turn to Professor Mystic.
Thank you, Mr. Bergstrom. The bylaws of the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing state as follows. The commission shall select a chair and vice chair. They shall be elected by a majority of those present at the first meeting of the year in each odd-numbered year. This being that time, are there any nominations for the position of chair?
Counselor, I'd like to nominate Representative Stevens, please.
Professor Rego has nominated Representative Stevens for the position of chair. Are there any other nominations? There being no other nominations, nominations are closed. All those in favor of Representative Stevens signify by saying aye.
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 Congratulations, Representative Stevens. Are there any nominations for the position of vice chair?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Judge Bernstein.
Senator Street has nominated Judge Bernstein for the position of vice chair. Are there any other nominations? There being no other nominations, nominations are closed. All those in favor of Judge Bernstein as vice chair of the commission signify by saying aye.
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 Congratulations to you, Judge Bernstein. That concludes the election of officers. Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. And thank you for everyone's support. I look forward to continuing to lead this commission in the path we've established. I think it's a great team we have together. And Representative Krajewski, I'm looking forward to you joining it. I think I just think we have a terrific group of folks here that are really thoughtful and bring a real diversity of perspectives to the table. And I think as a result, we're able to really move the needle on criminal justice here in PA.
I just wanted to chime in to thank everybody for that opportunity to continue in this position. I'm really enjoying it and working with everybody. So thank you.
I will note that with Leader McClinton's resignation, Chairman Stevens had appointed Judge Marsico to fill the position as chair of the Education and Outreach Committee. And with Representative Krajewski's appointment, Representative Stevens had appointed him to the committees that Leader McClinton had been on. So both the Executive and Administrative Committees and the Education and Outreach Committee. And so I believe that now that we have a new chair and vice chair, I'll just turn to the chair. I believe the existing standing committees with membership and committee chairs is in the materials. And I think we're moving forward with that group unless any changes.
No, everything is as you indicated.
Great. So lead staff will be reaching out to the chairs following this meeting to schedule committee meetings, usually about midpoint between the commission meetings, to cover any materials, bring members up to speed on any issues, and prepare for subsequent meetings. So thank you all, and appreciate everyone's service as chair and members of those committees. So now turning to the executive director's report, a handful of issues. First, in the materials, you will find an organizational chart. A couple things that I will point out in terms of positions and things like that. We have several vacant positions. One is a vacant position for a communications specialist, and another is a vacant position for a data analyst. And we also have a data analyst on family leave. And so regarding the two vacant positions, we have retained those as vacant positions, partly because of the budget situation and concerns about COVID and all that kind of stuff, and partly because the university has really pulled back on posting positions unless they were critical positions. And so we decided to just put a pause on those two positions. But a separate issue that we have been talking about for years, I discussed with the chairman, and that was the need to rebuild SGS Web. And we've been doing a lot of preliminary work on that. Part of that involved developing our own in-house applications and information technology unit, which Christy heads. And now that we've had that in place for more than a year, and that unit has taken over all of the work on SGS Web, both application support and enhancements. So we have no outside vendors. We thought that was actually the best model for moving forward on a parallel track to start construction, development, design, all those other things of a new application. And this gets to what Judge Tucker and others mentioned this morning about, end user ease of access in entering information, sentencing information, and so forth. So I discussed with Chairman Stevens the real sort of critical need to move forward with bringing on two positions to start that process of building this new application. We had talked before about the possibility of contracting it out, but I think that the better approach, because this is going to be an ongoing obligation, it's going to take quite a bit of time to just build the application, is to hire staff to add to the complement. And so with the chairman's approval, we moved forward with meeting with the university to discuss two information technology staff positions, programmer related positions. One would be a data analyst position. The other would be a business systems analyst position. And so we are in the process of posting those positions, and we hope to move forward so that by July 1st, we will be able to have those positions in place and start work. So when Christy reports out, she can add any more detail to that. I will note that we do have one vacant data analyst position that we are trying to fill, unsuccessful to date, but Eric can talk about that when he reports out. So that's the status of the open and vacant positions. Unless there's any questions, I'll move on to some information about just management and oversight.
Just one thing I wanted to share with the members. Mark and I had some pretty extensive conversations about this. I know Judge Bernstein was also in the mix on the emails back and forth. I did have some concerns about taking on recurring salary obligations. And just with some of our experience with the JRI funding, I was concerned. But Mark laid those concerns and really laid out a path forward for these positions in the long term, not just the short term. So I think after our conversation, I feel comfortable that the fiscal health of the commission is such that we're able to handle these positions. And frankly, it just makes sense, from a practical standpoint to have folks in-house working on these issues. So I appreciate your help with that, Mark.
Sure, and thank you to both of you for your support on that. And I'll go into a little bit of detail on that when we get to the fiscal issues, just to highlight a couple of those issues to show that this is sustainable. On management and oversight, just a couple of brief comments. We're clearly continue to be in the COVID-19 mode, and because the university has sort of a general policy of remote work until at least the end of the semester, I'd say until June 30th, staff is generally doing that. Unit managers have access to the office basically one day a week, and I go in sort of regularly, but for the most part, all staff has been working remotely, and it's been working incredibly well. There's a couple things that we sort of missed from the old days, but we've really built some capacity in sort of the remote space, and so Ryan will talk about some of that later. But I think we've seen a lot of progress, and I think there's a lot of lessons going forward. Regarding the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we've talked before, and we'll talk during the policy meeting about the academic review panel. One of the things that we sort of added to the agenda when talking about or thinking about new guidelines are concerns about about racial and ethnic issues, disproportionality, confinement, and community supervision of individuals. And so those are prominent in the discussions we've had with that group. And that group is a very diverse group in terms of race and ethnicity and gender, but also in terms of academic discipline. So it's been a really incredible unit. We'll talk a bit more about some of the work of that and sort of where I hope we're heading with that. But I also wanted to remind members that we really need help, your help, as we post positions to look for diversity in staff. I mean, that was one of the issues that was raised in June when members really talked about this issue of diversity. And we have a position, a data analyst position posted now. We'll have 2 positions posted soon in the programming area. And we're looking for any opportunity to really encourage diversity in the hiring. So I encourage you, if there's any contacts you have, any support you could provide us in trying to get people at the table, have people apply for positions. I want to work with you. We want to do that. We did create a postdoc position that Matt will talk about that's really focused on looking at racial and ethnic concerns and issues in sentencing. We tried very hard to actually have a diverse hiring there. We're not successful, although we worked with the university and had some other partners help us, but we still think it's an important focus for research. So Matt will talk about that. And I do want to just say something, again, not trying to steal Matt's thunder, but I appreciate the efforts of current and past members in helping to connect us with some of our historically Black colleges and universities. We've developed a really nice relationship with especially Lincoln University, but also Cheney University. And one of the really positive outcomes of that is we're starting to do some research projects with a faculty member at Lincoln. And we're having discussions about how we can engage with both of those campuses and with students at those campuses, and perhaps look for career paths for people at those institutions with the commission. So again, thanks to all the members for your efforts so far, but I think we need to keep diversity and equity and inclusion like on the agenda, and we have to keep looking at it because we have a lot of work to do. So, but thank you. And so I just want to turn finally to the financial or fiscal issues. There are materials in the packet and a lot of numbers, and I want to thank Jadine for all the work she does in managing this and keeping track of it. Let me just sort of give you the thumbnail sketch of where we are. During this fiscal year, we started with a very conservative budget because, as you recall, we only received 5 months of appropriations initially. And so we developed a budget that was based on 6 months of operations with 5 months of funding. And we were able to achieve that. And when we built the second half of the budget, when the full appropriation came through, we kept that as sort of the baseline. And because we haven't filled vacant positions, and because both our operating and travel costs are way down, we're going to end the year with a surplus, and a pretty healthy surplus. And so, as we've done in the past when we have surpluses, the first thing we wanted to do was reserve previous appropriations the General Assembly gave us as a sort of a reserve account. So a number of years ago, to deal with budget disruptions, the General Assembly created a reserve account for each of the legislative agencies and placed about $350,000 in our account as a reserve account, so that if there was some kind of break in the budget, we'd have some funds to go to. So that's in a lockbox. That's supposed to stay there and not be used. But that same year, there was a disruption of the budget, and the commission was given a special appropriation, an additional appropriation to get through a gap. And we've treated that as a reserve account. And so both of those accounts we have in place and we have reserved. And last year when we had to take, or 2 years ago when we had to take some money out of the one reserve account, we refunded it. So those are both where they were when we received them, and we have them in reserve. And because the commission has grown, we're larger than we were when the reserve account was first established. I think it is a good practice to see that as sort of our savings account and to keep those accounts there and safe and not use them if we don't have to. Which gets me to, as we end this year, we expect we'll have a surplus, and it could be as high as $200,000 or $300,000. And that sounds great. And it sounds like maybe we could go into the next year with a smaller appropriation. But the downside is that we were supposed to receive $400,000 this year as a separate appropriation from JRI. That was part of a 4-year $1.6 million appropriation to fund the rebuilding of SGS Web. So what I've discussed with chair and vice chair as a means to move forward with posting these positions and start the SGS Web project is to use the carryover funds, the surplus funds from this year to fund those positions. And then I am hopeful that by the time we get into next year, next fiscal year, we will, the JRI appropriation cycle will kick in. And at least for the remaining 3 years, we will get $400,000 a year for each of those years in order to sustain SGS Web and this rebuilding in those staff positions. But if for some reason JRI funding would fall short, we then do have those reserve accounts that we can look to, especially the second one, that supplemental salary. So I think we are in a good position for the next 3 to 5 years to have funding that we presently have with just our current appropriations moving forward to be able to sustain what we've been talking about. But 3 to 5 years is a long time, and a lot of things happen. A lot of things can change. And so I think, when we get further down that timeline, we can look at staff positions, we can look at our budgets and appropriations, and we can always, think about attrition or other kind of means to sustain what's the right mix of things for the commission at that point. So I'm confident that we can move forward with these hires. And that we can rebuild that SGS Web, and that we're not going in the hole because of it. So with that, let me just open it up to any questions. With the budget request, I'm working with Chairman Stevens to just identify sort of status quo moving forward, but a recognition that the JRI funds will not be coming through this year, and any kind of reserves or surplus we have will fill that void. So with that, I'll open it up.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Street.
I think that the suggestions of the executive director that have been made in consultation with the chair and vice chair sound prudent management, and therefore like to move that the body adopt the recommendations of the executive director.
Representative Stevens, you're muted.
Muted, Mr. Chairman.
But it was thoughtful, I'm sure.
It was brilliant. So do we need an actual motion on this?
I think it would be helpful, and it wasn't on the agenda, but I think it would be helpful because I asked you and the vice chair to move what you're allowed to under our enabling legislation. But I think having the full support of the commission would be great.
Okay, terrific. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Professor Rego, thank you. Any other discussion on this? All right, are there any negative votes?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. Mark, you had spoken about these reserve accounts. So those accounts are protected from, like, there's been a practice of sweeping money from reserve accounts, to settle budget shortfalls and things like that. So those are protected?
Well, protected in that the General Assembly established them as this fallback. So by their own decision, by the leadership of the General Assembly, they created these so that they would be like rollover funds. They would not be taken back from the commission. That second one, that supplemental appropriation, we treat that the same way. It's not in the same agreement by the bipartisan leadership, but we treat it the same way because we recognize that, with the growth of the commission and other demands, if there was a long budget stalemate, we may need additional resources. We may need some savings. And so we've treated it that way, but it doesn't have the same character as the other one.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Mr. Chairman, you're muted.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, are there any negative votes? All right, sounds great. Motion passes. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rep. And turning now to Matt to provide the Deputy Director's report.
Thanks, Mark. I think first I'll start with talking a little bit about our research partnerships. And I know that we may talk more about the academic advisory committee that we're engaged with, but I think that's been a really important opportunity, not just for the work that we're doing on that panel, but also for us to leverage our interactions with some scholars at different universities to think about new research opportunities. So as Mark mentioned, we have a very diverse panel from different universities and colleges here in the Commonwealth. We also have some partners from additional universities and a former member of the Sentencing Commission from universities across the country. So internal to the Commonwealth, we're working with faculty from Lincoln and Cheney University, Villanova, Duquesne, Penn State, University of Pittsburgh, and Temple. So this is, as I said, has afforded us a wonderful opportunity to work with the chair, Supervising Judge Tucker, as well as these members to really think about issues related to the 8th edition guidelines, which I assume we'll talk about later in this meeting. But as I mentioned, it's been an opportunity for us to educate some folks we haven't worked with about what the commission does, what sort of data we have, and has really opened up opportunities. And as Mark mentioned, we are working currently with a professor at Lincoln University to define a research project. We hope to engage with some of his students as well on this project. Hopefully, as COVID changes, we'll be able to visit some jurisdictions maybe with his students and have him, the students be introduced to criminal justice partners that we're working with. So that's been really exciting. In addition, we have a number of projects that are underway related to the Academic Review Committee. One of those is an offset that's looking at juvenile adjudications and how they're scored and how they're counted, building on some of the work that students at Drexel University Law had done in the past, but issues that the commission also has discussed. And that is in collaboration with a professor at Penn State University. And then I think that one of the areas in our partnership that continues to grow is our relationship directly with students. And so just to highlight a few of those, we are currently working with a student who's an MP, Master's in Public Policy student at Penn State University on his capstone project. He's interested in looking at issues related to juveniles who are sentenced as adults. We have been a student in that same program reached out to us for a summer internship this upcoming summer. We've also been talking with a second-year law student at Villanova who is interested in having a summer internship, as well as a undergraduate in the data science program at Duquesne University. So through our internal networks, rather than even advertising for these positions, a lot of individuals are reaching out to us. And I think what Mark highlighted about the diversity, equity, and inclusion, this is another great opportunity if individuals are known in your spheres that would be a good fit for the commission, we would certainly welcome working with them either through an intern role or, as Mark mentioned, through openings that we have on our current staff. Related, as you know, our work with Penn State for students and our graduate students and our postdoc goes through the Criminal Justice Research Center. We posted an advertisement for a postdoctoral fellow in race and ethnic disparity in sentencing. We had a pretty diverse committee that we worked with, which included representatives from Penn State Criminology Department, Penn State Law School, as well as a professor at Penn State Harrisburg who helped on that search committee. And we ended up offering the position, and it was accepted by a PhD student at the University of Cincinnati, Claire Strange, who is working on her dissertation, and the title of her dissertation is Judicial Variations in Sentencings and Contributions of Caseloads and Context, that really focuses on the goal of reducing disparities through the identification of their contribution. Beyond her focus on racial and ethnic issues, she has a background in social work and had some applied work in the criminal justice system. So we think she'll be a great addition to our team. And additionally, our current postdoc, Miranda Galvin, who has her PhD from the University of Maryland, will be returning this upcoming fall for her third year with us. The academic job market was not very favorable currently, and she viewed this as another opportunity to continue her research, and she's been a fantastic partner with us and also has a number of projects ongoing with faculty in the Penn State Criminology Department, utilizing and leveraging our data from the Sentencing Commission. So we're excited about that. And just as a reminder, Dr. Galvin worked closely with me on the project we did on vital strategies that looked at substance abuse and use and probation revocations, and gave a presentation a couple commission meetings ago to this group. Finally, the last update, I just want to give an update on our continued efforts to revise and improve our website. As you know, for a couple years, we've been thinking about how to modernize the website that we have to make it more user-friendly, to improve the organization of information. We worked with a consultant who was quite helpful in thinking about some of the artwork and the design of that. And so Christy and myself and Mark have been engaging with the Information and Technology Liberal Arts team, who, as I mentioned at the last meeting, is willing to work on the design efforts for free as part of our partnership with Penn State. So that team is now putting into action the ideas that we had, and a couple features to just highlight, and then I'll conclude my comments. I think that our website, unlike other websites, has a lot of information. We see our website is serving a critical role in transparency and being an archive of historical data and information. So as part of our efforts, we are bifurcating the web page to be including information that is more contemporaneous, upfront and visible, be it recent reports or recent initiatives, recent training videos, recent statutes and legislation. And then we're going to have an archival feature. So as an example, anything related to the 7th edition guidelines would be front and center. Maybe the earlier guidelines will be in this archival component. And we're hoping that this will help with the navigation and the user friendliness of our page. A second feature is we currently have a news items, and it's a listing of events, including this commission meeting. We would like to showcase the efforts of the commission through a calendar that really shows the outreach and education units activities, the activities that others are doing by visiting or presenting at conferences or presenting to specific groups. So this will be another area where the commission's work will be showcased, hopefully front and center. And then finally, maybe this is the biggest challenge, and it's technologically based, will be to have a refinement in the way that our search engine works so that documents can be found more easily. I think the architecture of the website itself will lend itself to things being found quicker and easier, but we're working with the folks at Penn State on ideas about how to tag documents with keywords as well as just basic search functionality. We're still, fingers crossed, hoping that we'll be able to share with you a functioning website in June, and we'll have to test and make sure it's complete and a lot of other steps before it goes live. But they'll be living in two separate spaces that one could be shared and certainly utilized before it's live for the public. So thank you. Mark, this time you're muted.
Yep, there we go. And just closing out this section, I wanted to make one other comment about commission members, and in this case, a former commission member, former member and former chair, Judge Sheila Wood Skipper, is going to be recognized in the near future with the unveiling of her portrait in Philadelphia. And so I believe we received a notice, and we're passing that notice on to members and staff. Just a great accomplishment for a former chair and former commission member. So you'll be receiving an email from Kathy with that information. And in the world we are today, everything's virtual. So you'd be able to attend remotely if you're interested. So thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the executive, administrative, and financial. I'll turn it back to you for applications and others.
Is he muted again?
There you
go.
Yep. All right. Okay, so moving on to the application and information technology section, Christy.
Okay, and I am not muted, making sure. Thank you, Chairman Stevens, and good afternoon, everyone. The Applications and Information Technology Unit has quite a lot going on right now, but I'll try to keep it brief just because I know we had a few topics left over from this morning that we want to discuss a little later. As far as SGS Web updates, we are currently implementing functionality in SGS Web for the probation guidelines that were enacted by Amendment 6. Along with that, we are making some changes to support short sentence parole and state reentry supervision, which were both mandated by the JRI-2 Act 115. And then related to Act 115, it was around this time last year, actually, that we implemented a number of other changes in SGS Web because of Act 115. And we've since realized there are a few places where we were not being consistent with language or fields used in the application. So we've been working to make that consistent and make sure it's aligned with Act 115. Another change that we are working on is for statute 9718.5 that took effect a couple of years ago and implements a mandatory period of probation of 3 years for certain sexual offenders. So we're making a change in SGS Web that will alert users when that mandatory period of probation is applicable and ask users if the court actually ordered the mandatory probation. All of the changes that I've spoken about so far will be going live in April, so next month. If you're interested in more detailed information for any of these changes, then the supplemental materials starting on page 16 has the requirement specifications that will provide a full description of the impacts to SGS Web. So in addition to these changes that are going live in April, JNet recently, although it's probably been about a year ago, released a new version of the court case event request reply web service, which is used to retrieve data from AOPC's case management systems. They've asked us to switch to this new version by July of this year, so we've been busy implementing it. Just to give you some context, in SGS Web, This JNet web service provides data to the OTN search function, which is used to initiate new cases in SGS Web, and also to the criminal history data retrieval process, which is used to calculate sentence risk assessment recommendations. So the changes have a pretty significant impact on SGS Web, but will not be visible or noticeable to end users if we do our job right. So those changes are in progress, and we hope to begin testing them soon. I'm going to actually switch gears to some of our other unit efforts. So Mark talked a lot about the SGS Web rebuild. So we've started calling that the SGS Web Next Gen initiative, and we've been investing some time into that. So at this point, we are still in what I would call a discovery phase to kind of define the scope and the overall approach for the project. We did meet with the Commission's executive team and some members of the Education and Outreach Unit to discuss the expected requirements for like the 8th edition guidelines, the state parole guidelines, and the recommitment ranges, since those will all need to be built into this next version of SGS Web. And then we also started discussing the limitations of the current application architecture, pain points that have been reported by end users, and some ideas for improving and streamlining the process in SGS Web. So hopefully we'll be addressing some of the issues that came up during the policy meeting this morning that might be affecting compliance and the submission of sentences. So not a lot to share about that today, but you'll be hearing more from me about this in the next few commission meetings. Mark also mentioned the 2 new positions that we are going to be posting for our unit, which will also both play key roles in the SGS Web Next Gen initiative. The business systems analyst will actually act as kind of a liaison between our team, other commission staff, criminal justice and legislative stakeholders, and other subject matter experts to help gather and document requirements for the new functionality and any changes that we'll be making for SGS Web. They'll help with the design of the application to make sure it makes sense for what we're trying to accomplish, and make sure it's simplifying data entry and not adding more of a burden to users. And they'll also help with testing any new functionality we implement, which is a critical piece of application development to make sure that we've met the requirements and that the application is functioning properly. The other position, I think Mark might have referred to it as a data analyst, but it's going to be a programmer analyst. And they will join the 2 other developers on our team, Steve Adams and Stephanie Kohler. At least to begin with, I kind of plan to have the new programmer analyst mainly focus on maintaining and supporting the existing SGS Web application, so that Steve and Stephanie can really focus on the redesign of SGS Web. So taking over some of the work they're doing to free up their time. But that's not to say that this person will not eventually be involved when we start the actual development work, since I think we all will be focused on the rebuild. The last few things I'll mention is that, as Matt mentioned, we continue to support the website redesign. We've also been working with the research data analytics team to look at a replacement for the SASBI data reporting portal. We'll actually be meeting with Microsoft in the next couple of weeks for a demonstration of Power BI, which is the tool we're really looking at that we think we're going to be going with, but maybe Eric will talk more about that. And then our unit is managing the live streaming of YouTube of these meetings today. I don't think we've mentioned that, but our meetings are being streamed to YouTube as we speak. I'll finish by reporting that through the end of December, 80,374 sentences have been submitted with 2020 dates of sentence. And as usual, the sentences submitted report by county and year is available in the supplemental material starting on page 14. So that's all I have, unless there are any questions for me.
Any questions for Christy?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Maybe it's not for Christy, it could be for anyone else. Because the SGS Web is something that's funded through the commission's appropriation, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Judge. SGS Web was built by the commission, and we host it in JNet. So we sort of leverage the JNet infrastructure so that all counties connect, and we can have a data exchange with AOPC and others. But this is totally funded by and supported by the commission.
Right, because the reason I asked that question, I know there's concern from the Supreme Court about the budget request and the judicial computer systems, the fee that goes to fund that being diverted. And I know Justice Barrett sent a letter to the governor on February 16th saying that if appropriate funding isn't received, they were going to have to shut down the Common Pleas case management system. So I don't know how that plays into the SGS Web.
Yeah, Judge, that would be, it's not fatal, but it would be terrible. And first, AOPC deserves incredible credit for what they've created. It's a national model in terms of not just CPCMS and the MDJ system, but the interchange and exchanges through JNet with other system players and clearly us. I mean, we consume information from them and we send them information. They do the same with state police and others. And it's that integration, that virtual integration, that is like the envy of other states. It provides a lot of power. And the loss to the commission if CPCMS was not there would be twofold. The first would be that we simplify our process and we improve our accuracy by using as a starting point the end user just putting in the OTN, the offense tracking number. And because of that, through JNet, we can then just import from AOPC both offender and offense information and populate our screens. So if CPCMS wasn't there, people would have to like enter in all of that information, which is what they had to do long ago. So that would be, it would be inefficient, and it would there would be more errors. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is, we've talked about full reporting and certification, and the way we do that is we map or match convictions in CPCMS to sentences reported to us. And we're able to filter it to line up the cases and figure out if there's misses. And so we would not have that available as just sort of a check on reporting. We wouldn't know what our blind spots are. And so, I just, it seems every year AOPC's, struggling with that, but it's an incredible system. And I hope there's a resolution for the courts.
And I realize we're early in the budget season, but I think it's just important that our legislative members are aware of this issue. And I'm sure you're going to be hearing more about it. I know our legislative committee from the state trial judges is going to be engaged in this issue as well. So, okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Christy? All right. Well, then we will move along to research and data with Eric.
All right, thank you very much. And like Christy, I will focus on significant updates since the last meeting. And at the last meeting, we reported that the Research and Data Analysis Unit has completed all 4 modules in the PCCD Projections Grant Project. These 4 modules allow us to project DOC prison population using court data, provide impact analysis models based on changes to the guidelines, model parole release, revocations, recommitments, and also model the probation supervision period. So right now, we're continuing to work on these models to improve their functionality by adding more parameters and variables that we can use to filter the data, which will allow us more fine-tuned control over what we're projecting. And these additions can be things like county and demographic information, but also more detailed offense breakdowns. And we currently also have plans to further validate the modules after these improvements are completed. And we're working on more output as well. And that's through reports, charts, and other graphics to get better data visualization. And you can find a copy of our improvement timeline in the supplemental materials on page 48. Mark is going to mention this further later, I think, but since the last commission meeting, Judge Tucker convened 3 more meetings of the academic review panel, and research staff were able to provide more data and analyses for the consideration of the panel, including alternate ways to calculate prior record score and analyses about how these changes would affect our sentencing outcomes. For the parole project, we're still continuing to work with the parole board on building the draft parole guidelines. The parole board requested a delay for implementation of the guidelines until January 2022, so they could get enough time to build the IT infrastructure that they need for the guidelines, but also to validate the strong R risk assessment tool, which will be replacing the LSIR. And in light of this, we've been reviewing the literature on both the LSIR and the strong R assessments so that we can compare the differences in each respective domain. And we'll be continuing to research and prepare for any needed revisions to the parole guidelines after the strong R is adopted. We're also considering how to properly validate and implement our pretrial domestic violence risk tools, continuing to review validation and assessment literature on that risk tool validation, and including research into issues related to local validation, proper sampling methods, and tests for bias and disparity. So the Research and Data Analysis Unit is also managing several other research initiatives, mainly program evaluations. We're coordinating with our criminal justice partners to get better access to the data that's required to report on these programs that range from restrictive conditions of probation, recidivism risk reduction incentive programs, the state drug treatment program, state motivational boot camp, pretrial diversion programs, prisoner reentry programs, prison reentry programs, and other local or county programs, so quite a few. We have been working on a plan to evaluate all these programs and working towards the creation of recidivism databases that will be required. We're hoping that a single database would cover most of these programs in one fell swoop. So in addition to these program evaluations, our postdoctoral scholar and grad assistants have been working on a COVID-19 impact analysis, which focuses on trying to determine what effect the pandemic has had on sentencing, particularly incarceration sentences. And they're also researching the effect of concurrent and consecutive sentencing practices, as well as how juvenile adjudication scoring has an impact on sentencing. These projects are all designed so they can help us adjust our best practices when we're considering the prior record score. So we're also continuing to work on our data management tasks. And as Christy mentioned, we're working with them in applications and IT to find a replacement for not only our BI tools, but also our application servers that we use in our data cleaning processes since they're out of warranty. The university is also transitioning away from Box, which is a cloud storage service that we primarily use not just for storage, but also for database dissemination. And we're switching to OneDrive. So we're also considering how that change will affect our data set requests. And in addition, again, as Christy mentioned, we're considering Power BI and other business intelligence tools as potential replacements for SAS BI, which is our current interactive data portal tool. We're currently using Power BI for data reports requests to great success. And based on some preliminary talks we've had with Microsoft, we're optimistic that Power BI will be able to both replicate our current functionality and will be able to expand it in the future. We've also been in contact with the Pennsylvania State Police regarding updating the format that we get for criminal history data that they provide for us. And this could significantly aid us in cleaning and coding criminal history data. We are waiting for updates regarding this reformatting, particularly since it could significantly increase the accuracy and timeliness of the data that's needed for a lot of these program evaluations. And then lastly, we're revitalizing our data documentation And this is meant both to help us organize and report on our own data, but also help train staff with updated guides and schemas. To this end, we've consolidated a data library that has all of our internal sentencing databases and are compiling a similar set for external databases that we've acquired over time from our criminal justice partners at the AOPC, PSP, DOC, and the Parole Board. So we're continuing also to supply data reports and legislative impact analyses. We're still providing data set requests to scholars, criminal justice practitioners, and also to the general public through our interactive data portal. And on the staffing side, as mentioned, we are reposting our position for research data analyst. And again, this is going to focus on assisting in the database management, in the data cleaning, but will also help some of these sentencing impact analyses. Again, as mentioned, for this position, we want to continue our outreach efforts and make sure that this position is open to as broad a population as possible. And as Mark and Matt mentioned, please feel free to inform any capable candidates you may know about this position, which will reopen soon, likely within a week or so, and just to keep an eye on it. So we're currently short-staffed, but because of our developed documentation and guidelines, we should be able to continue all of our necessary data management and research functionality. So with that, thanks very much, and I'll turn it back now.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Are there any questions for Eric? All right, hearing none, we will move on next to Ryan with Education and Outreach.
Thank you, Chairman. Recognizing that we have two topics to discuss yet, both the certification, reporting and certification and compliance, as well as the academic review panel. I'll be brief in my comments. So I'll start with noting that the highlights of the Education Outreach Committee, or I'm sorry, unit can be found on pages 39 through 42 of your highlights notebook. But if you're really excited about all the important details from the Education and Outreach unit, take a look at the supplemental materials, particularly pages 54 through 87. We've provided you with some nice figures there that will get to a few of the points that are on the slide. I'm a visual individual, and so we tried to provide you with some visuals of the work of the unit. So I'll skip over the reporting and verification and certification and compliance so that we can get to the policy discussion of that. And I'll tie in all of the bullets that you see in front of you for some just big takeaways from the unit. And I think the first thing is, this is a nice opportunity to give a year-end summary, and which we provided in the commentary. But, COVID has impacted our traditional way of educating and reaching out to counties. However, we've been extremely active in 2020 and very active here in 2021 in the first 2 full months. And I think if you look at the provided materials, you'll see that we're coming off of some of our busiest years in most recent history in the past 3 to 4 years, from just SGS Web support and providing individuals at the county level on, some of the issues that have been raised here today on just reporting of information into SGS Web, the difficulties of the application. We have a great team here in the Education Outreach Unit that all have experience with SGS Web and have done the hard work from the county side, so can empathize and sympathize with members at the county level. But also just the push from 2020 with Justice Reinvestment 2 and the sentence risk assessment from the commission. We've seen record numbers of user role requests, which is an indication of counties coming on board with departments that had historically not engaged in the use of SGS Web. And so, we're proud of the work there and support the counties in their efforts to review their practices and policies on how they use SGS Web. And then just going down through the list here and sort of wrapping it all together, we've created monthly updates that are really effective and efficient in communicating timely information of the commission's work to practitioners. We have created a YouTube channel, and as Christy said, this is live streaming today. I'm not sure. We're probably at like 1 million views right now, I'm sure. But we also are using that as an opportunity to produce educational videos that individuals can watch over and over and over, and if that's helpful. And We will be releasing one by the end of today or by tomorrow on Amendment 6, and we'll be looking at future videos on discussing reporting and options available to counties for SGS web reports and so forth. So I think, we're growing as a unit coming out of 2020 and into 2021. I've already mentioned other activities that we have done, but just specifically on some outreach. We held 57 individual meetings with counties last year, both in person and remotely. And we conducted 30 to 40 more just training opportunities for counties. So we were quite busy in communicating the policies of the commission and the fundamentals of the guidelines. And that's something we look to continue to do this year and already have been fairly active in that. And then I would just note on the outreach activities, we've also partnered with a number of agencies and associations to work with them on continuing to communicate important parts of the guidelines and the commission's work. And we will be working with JNet next week to do an SGS web training to practitioners. I know Mark and I will be meeting with individuals in Philadelphia in the upcoming weeks. Staff have met with other counties like Jefferson. I'm discussing with Dauphin and other counties just on the use of SGS web and the reporting. So I think we're trying to fill some of those gaps in some of the areas that we've seen coming out of the 2019 reporting analysis. And then, of course, we put some information in about the website statistics if you want to take a look at that. And all of that can be really detailed in the supplemental part of the materials provided. But I promise to be brief, and that's about as brief as you'll get from me. But I want to make sure that there's requisite time to discuss the certification and compliance part, because I just want to say and reiterate what maybe Mark had mentioned. From an education outreach standpoint, it'll be great to have expectations to communicate to the counties. And, we can work within whatever decisions you all make, the members of the commission. But I just think having something concrete, at least in this year, to communicate to counties will be certainly helpful to them. And we're looking forward to doing that. So with that being said, I'll turn it back to the chairman, and thanks for the time.
Well, actually, let me cut in here because this is the time when we really wanted to get back to the certification of compliance. So let me pick up on that point, provide you with a little bit of information. Senator Street asked about the sort of the distribution of counties, like who's reporting and who isn't. And if you look at our 85% threshold that staff discussed, I believe there are only 5 counties that did not report it or that were at less than 85%. And I believe 2 of them were between 80 and 85%, and those were Lancaster and Dauphin County. And then the 3 below 80% were Philadelphia, Jefferson, and Washington counties. So that we had that document in the December notebook. We can share it with you again, but I think just at this sort of high level, we're talking about 5 counties and some that are pretty close with that 85% threshold. And in the counties that are below the 85% threshold, we're engaged with them. As Ryan said, we'll be in Philadelphia the next couple of weeks to really focus on the SGS web issue and try to offer whatever support or assistance information that we can. And I know there's been engagement with Jefferson County. I know there's work with Lancaster and Dauphin. So those counties that are below the threshold we're working with, and I think it's realistic to sort of figure out a pathway to have them meet the 85% threshold this year. But that's a call for the commission members. Let me just point out one other thing, because I know we're sort of focused on the negative, and I want to focus on the positive. There's a county like a class 3 county, Erie County, which is one of the larger counties reporting data in the state at 100% compliance. Allegheny County, not too shabby a size county, is at 99% reporting. So we know counties can do it, but we also know there are things that get in the way. There are process issues, there is turnover, there's education, there is just sensitivity. And so, the commission has to decide what the right path is, but we really think that we're putting something there that's achievable even now during this year, but it's going to be your call about when to implement this and where to draw lines in terms of thresholds. So with that, let me just maybe turn it to the chair, because we do have, before the commission, a recommendation regarding what staff has prepared as a certification of compliance and a reporting threshold. And if the commission makes a decision on this, we can communicate it to counties and really work with them with those details in mind. But it's really the commission's call. So I'll turn it back to the chair.
All right. So, I mean, I know there was some conversation during the policy committee meeting. Do we want to pick up where we left off there? Judge Marsico, I don't know if you have any additional comments beyond what you were discussing during the policy committee meeting.
I mean, I think it's important that we, have compliance as best we can, but I also recognize, that certain counties have had some issues with that. So yeah, I think it's just a matter. I mean, I like the proposal that staff has presented. I guess the only thing that I brought up before was whether 85% or maybe 80% the first year, 85% the second year. But I'm fine with the proposal they did. I raised my concerns. I'm glad. I know Ryan and his crew are working with those. I just worry about the loss of money, but this has been a problem for years. Counties that aren't compliant, and then we don't have good data to set policy, and those of you in the legislature don't have the data that you need, to make decisions regarding sentencing and statutes, and things like that. So, I really would like to have the data, and when big chunks of it are missing, then you guys can't make your decisions that you need to in the legislature. So all that, Mr. Chair, just to say, I can go along with the 85%. I thought 80 might be a place to start at, but I'm fine with the staff's recommendation.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions along those lines?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just, at 12:15, I just received an email of a mandatory training regarding the SGS Web User Guide. It's going to be presented by Executive Director Mark and Ryan next week on the 9th. So I don't know if the judges in Philadelphia are listening in on this or not, but less than 20 minutes ago, I just received a mandatory from the administrative judge, and that usually doesn't happen. It's usually a webinar. You show up if you want, but this one is mandatory. So I feel confident that the Philadelphia being below the number it was not intentional. I really believe that it was just some inadvertence and some other things, but we're taking this serious. Of course, we do have the most people being sentenced in the Commonwealth, as well as the need for this $18 million. I mean, we're not going to let that go at all. I know that. So I feel comfortable and confident that we will pick those numbers up and be in compliance in quick fashion.
Well, that's great news. All right.
May I just respond briefly to Judge Tucker's comments?
Sure.
I just wanted to pick up on one thing and echo that, in our communication with counties, we have seen that similar response from the counties that are below the current threshold that we were talking about, as well as other counties that were above the threshold that we've have established. So we're encouraged by that, and we continue to reach out to counties, even if we haven't heard from them. But I think what's happening in Philadelphia is also happening in other counties. So I just want to say thanks for recognizing that, and we look forward to continuing the communication with counties.
And Mark, the one thing you said earlier, the policy committee, was providing a mid-year update. I would like to make that, I don't know, it needs to be part of our action here, but I really do think that would be necessary, to give the courts an idea of where they stand at that time.
Sure, Judge, we definitely can do that. I think that's a great suggestion to incorporate into whatever the commission approves. And as Ryan mentioned, one of the other things we can do is really make sure that we're sort of pointing out the tools that are already available to all users out there in terms of, on a monthly basis, running your own report to see sort of what where you stand. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Appreciate that.
And if I could just delve back into attempting to find a way to simplify this process. It apparently is extremely complicated to enter these, and I'm not making excuses, but it's not easy from what I understand to enter these figures for the sentencing. If there can be a way that it could be less complicated, I think that would help as well.
Yeah, Judge, and what Christy was just talking about, and I keep forgetting like the label I'm supposed to be using. Christy, help me with that.
The SGS Web Next Gen.
Next Gen initiative. That is what that's all about. And actually, Judge, also the work of the Academic Review Committee and looking at thinking about the 8th edition guidelines, they're almost complementary. If we can streamline some of the policy stuff, make it just easier, simpler, straightforward, we can also automate some of that, and then we can build that into the application so that there's much less user stuff. Right now, there's just, we had talked from the very start with AOPC about like building our application into CPCMS to try to make it easier. And there's just too many sort of disconnects right now. So you're absolutely right. We have to do that. And that's why, we sort of set the threshold, what we thought was pretty low, because we appreciate we have to do work too. So I want to work with you on that and everyone else as we think about how we simplify it as well as how we improve reporting.
Mark, would these standards be applied retroactively, or is this just prospectively?
It's prospectively in terms of next year will apply to this year's data. This is the first year it will apply. And we've been talking to courts during the past year, because remember the mandate came down in 2019. So since then we've been pushing this idea that there's this full reporting and certification process. So, it didn't apply in 2019, it was end of the year, didn't apply in 2020, and for 2021, it will only apply starting next year, looking back at this data.
So it'll apply for, the one thing that I would just caution, if this was a 2019 mandate, then we had basically 1 year of trying to implement this before everything got turned upside down with COVID. And I imagine it's created some challenges around implementation, and the more people you have to coordinate with, more complicated that can become. And so perhaps we should adopt the rules, but should have some provision that they go and enforce some period of time after the end of COVID, which hopefully we're reaching an end of it. But quite frankly, because none of us are really scientists or epidemiologists, we're just guessing based on what we hear from other people. So that might be, I think at a minimum, there should be some sort of parenthetical note about, that we're trying to implement this process during the midst of a global pandemic.
Yeah, that's a fair comment, Senator. Thanks. Yep.
I also had a question in regards to, I was glad to hear that Judge Tucker got a notification about a mandatory training. But are there any other plans from the commission in terms of support or resources or whatever necessary to help the counties get their numbers up? And then I guess related to that, and it sort of feeds into the senator's point, has there been any assessment that counties that are below the threshold actually can, given the support necessary, get to the threshold before that funding decision is made?
Well, that's a good question. As I said, most counties are at or above the threshold. So it's for those handful of counties. And we have been, I think Ryan has met with all of those, or we are meeting with those, but we've certainly had conversations, and not just with the judges, although that's an important audience, but district attorneys, probation offices, others, because the way SGS Web is built, the court gets to determine the process in the county. And one of the things we've spent time talking to counties about is, do you have the right process in place? Maybe the court needs to review that and decide how things are done, because each county sort of does it a different way, but in some counties, the DA's office plays a more prominent role than other counties. Some counties it's probation, some counties it's the judge's law clerk. So, or it could be a combination. So, I'm glad you raised it, but that's one of the things we have conversations with counties about what works best in your county, and then let's work together to make that happen.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Mark. And then I would just underscore the need for having these regular reporting check-ins. I know we'd mentioned potentially doing one in June. I even think maybe more regular than that, just so that we know whether counties are on task to hit their numbers. And then if it's looking dire, say if it's June or some other time later in the year, and there's still some counties that are lagging behind, I hope we could have a conversation about what kind of relief can be done to help the counties reach that threshold.
Sure, and this is all, it's in your control, right? The commission, this is a policy decision by the commission. Commission can decide something now and can revisit it later this year, because the final decision on certification will be next April. And so the commission can set a policy and can revisit when and how to apply it. I don't think we can increase, but we can certainly reduce or suspend, and that's your call.
Okay, so I guess, are we in a position now where everyone's comfortable? Because we need to adopt whatever the initial standards are, notwithstanding your comments about we can go ahead and later on make adjustments. You need a motion today, right, as to what these initial standards will be for certification and compliance.
Yeah, staff would recommend that what we have proposed, that the commission would adopt that, and that we communicate to the counties, and we also build into that a formal review at mid-year, so in July. But we will also make sure that we provide information to each county on how they can create their own records more regularly, whether it's monthly, or I think monthly is probably the most the shortest duration. But we can provide that information as well, so that they have additional information, and we can also provide assistance as we have been doing.
Okay, so is there a motion to adopt the staff's recommendation as it relates to JRI 2 reporting and certification?
So moved.
All right, Judge Marsico, is there a second?
Second, Judge Bernstein.
All right, thanks, Judge. All right, is there any further discussion? Are there any negative votes? All right, terrific. Motion passes. Thank you.
And thank you. And Ryan, I think that covers everything in this unit. I think policy is the remaining thing. Is that correct? All right.
That's correct.
All right, Diane.
Sure, thank you. We'll start with the academic review panel that was convened to help guide us and inform the 8th edition sentencing guidelines. It's chaired by Judge Tucker. And to orient you to the materials and the supplemental materials, on page 99 is a list of the members covering across the state and country. The meeting summaries are on page 100, and the presentation from February 23rd starts on page 101. We've had a total of 6 meetings, and since the last commission meeting, we've had 3 meetings. At 2 meetings, we reviewed key concepts and principles such as purposes of sentencing, proportionality, simplicity. We discussed how the guidelines were originally developed and a prior comprehensive review. We talked about what led to the need for another comprehensive review, including recommendations from the Strategic Planning Work Group, subsequent subcommittees, JR 1 and 2, practitioners, among others. So these help us frame the issues that we're trying to address in this comprehensive review and the development of the 8th edition. In one meeting, we reviewed 2 alternatives to how to calculate the prior record score with an eye on racial equity. We'll continue to explore the PRS alternatives, and also we need to develop a protocol to review the OGS assignments. We're trying to reduce the impact of the PRS, and with so many offenses, we really need a systematic way to assign OGSs.
Yeah, Diane, if I could add in, and then I'm going to turn it to Judge Tucker because we didn't have a chance to talk about this morning. But as Matt said when he gave his report, one of the benefits but challenges of pulling together a group that's pretty broad and some who have a lot of experience with sentencing in our guidelines and some that have none is that early on we had to go through the fundamentals. And actually, I think the first 3 meetings we had prior to our last commission meeting were really very fundamental, but I think really helpful in really teasing out key issues and concepts and things like that. And again, as Diane said, we're probably hitting on a couple of key things in terms of thinking about just if you're going to do it all over, what would the guidelines look like? And one thing is sort of structural stuff. And this gets to some of what Judge Tucker said and others about ease of use, right? So simplifying the application, the guidelines so that you can simplify the application and making sure that you do it in such a way that you can automate things so that if we're creating enhancements that within the application, it can apply the enhancement. It doesn't ask the end user for a lot of information. It's just, you can automate it. That we can simplify the prior record score so it doesn't take an advanced degree to figure it out, that you can just simply, you get into a much more simple prior record score consideration, and it has less of an impact at sentencing. So those are some basic things. And then some of the policies that we've talked about trying to achieve is that there just be better consistency and fairness at sentencing, and that there's more certainty, that we have perhaps narrower ranges that are more focused on a given type of sentencing option, because that promotes more certainty and consistency when the parties are negotiating or when the court's reviewing a negotiated plea. And then that targeting, who are the kind of people that we think should be in the community on probation? And who are the kind of people that seem most appropriate for county jail versus state prison? So you remove a little bit of discretion in terms of saying to judges, we're just going to recommend everything, and we're much more focused in the recommendation. But the idea is these are advisory guidelines. Judges then have to apply them to an individual case, and there should be all the opportunity for judges to depart or aggravate or mitigate because of specific circumstances. So that's what we've been trying to do. And with the committee, the panel that we've been meeting with, we've tried to sort of walk through the recommendations that were made by the Strategic Planning Work Group. And I think we were sort of on track. And I think the last meeting we had to regroup to just, and Judge Tucker, raised this, let's just sort of recall why we're meeting and what we're trying to do. And so we had sort of that kind of meeting last week, I guess it was. But I think now, we need to just get back on track with really sort of objectively going through some concrete examples. Here's what the recommendation is. Here's how it would play out. What do you think about it? And move through that. But I think, Matt and Diane both talked about one big area that we didn't do much on before, and we think is a big lift this time around, is prior record score. Really rethinking that. And we've spent a lot of time, Matt doing all kinds of analysis and us discussing with this group, how should prior record score work and what should we take into account? So I think you're going to see, when we bring stuff back to you, I think you're going to see a lot of work in that area, a lot of new work that I think reflects this group. And so I'll close and turn it to Judge Tucker to remind you of the other issues we added to the mix. And the first and foremost is racial impact. And what we found was there's a racial impact as you increase the seriousness of the current offense, and there's a racial impact when you increase the prior record score. And so if part of our job is to think seriously about trying to neutralize the impact of race, we have to look particularly at prior record score and how and what we do with that and how we create that, because there's legacy issues there that impact that, and we need to address that. So that's a big area we're looking at. That's why criminal history is listed there. We also need to simplify, because that's the most complicated part of the guidelines right now. We need to simplify that. And then we need to incorporate the JRI 2 provisions. So that's where we're going. I think we're going to get back on track, and hopefully by the next meeting we will have recommendations that we can bring to you to discuss. But I want to turn it over to Judge Tucker, who's been chairing this effort and working with the academic committee.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really like the way you say you're going to turn it over to me, but you said everything that I was going to say. So you didn't leave anything else for me to say. But I think you hit it right on the head, and as well as Diane had mentioned several things, as well as Ryan. And yeah, I just want to say the presentation that Matt did, I guess it was maybe 2 meetings ago, was excellent. I mean, superb. It just really laid out the work that has gone into putting together this 8th edition, and the panel that has been put together is just phenomenal. I mean, we're talking about 12 individuals, basically from across the country, not literally, but from different places in the country, who bring together such a wealth of information on this specific topic that it's coming together so well. There's a lot to be done, but I think this group is situated to do it, because in terms of gender, we've got a cross section of race, of gender, of culture, and the thoughts that are being put together here are really going to culminate to something I think to be well worth looking at and implementing. And speaking outside of the meetings that we've had and talking to the committee, they've just been telling me perhaps some things that they may not have felt completely comfortable saying amongst themselves, but they're basically complimenting the outstanding staff and the commission. And they realize that the task that we have is daunting. I mean, it's a huge state system and a considerable task. But nonetheless, they're willing to work and help think outside of the box, and at the same time respecting the institutional considerations that are mandated by the legislature. So having said that, basically, I don't know that there's very much more to say except stay tuned to the result that I really think is going to be worth the time that's going to be spent in this. Now, I have no idea how much more time we're going to put into this, how many more meetings we're going to have, but no one has indicated that they're not willing to meet. No one has indicated that, look, I'm only going to do 2 more meetings or 1 more meeting. It seems that they are willing to ride this out until we come to a conclusion. And I think we'll be able to do that, hopefully within the next maybe 3 meetings or so. Hopefully we can do it within 3-4 meetings or so. So yeah. And again, I really appreciate the privilege of being appointed to chair this academic review panel, because it really is something in terms of the time being put in it, the minds that are meeting, and the thoughts that are coming out of it.
Thanks, Judge. I really appreciate that. And as the judge said, we started out when Chairman Stevens sent out the invitation. we like hooked them in for 3 meetings. We said we'd have 3 meetings between, the start and the first commission meeting, and then you're done. And every one of them re-upped because we said, hey, we're going to keep working. If you want to stay involved, let's, do it. And everyone's showing up for these meetings we have every other week. And then the other thing is, I know I've received direct feedback from 4 or 5 of the members wanting to work on separate projects or issues, and then working with Matt on partnering on research things, whether it's juvenile adjudications or race or prior record score or other things. So it's, it's sort of what was envisioned, I guess, but I wasn't sure was going to happen. And so it's been a great experience. So I appreciate Chairman Stevens getting us underway. And like the judge said, I hope, that 3 more meetings, we can bring something back to you that is pretty much a good starting point for where we go. But it'll be organic, I guess. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting because a lot of the things that they're mentioning, like Professor Babatunde, really, you can't put a number on some of these things. The thoughts, the feelings that go into bringing together a sentence. So it's going to be interesting to see how we can formalize or at least come to a conclusion, which would be what would be the best effort in moving forward.
Yeah, and even with Professor Babatunde from Lincoln University, one of the things he and I have talked about is some of his suggestions and issues almost are a better fit for implementing in the community, like a program and services in the community, and it almost is complementary to guidelines, but guidelines have to provide the space for that too. And so it's a real, people from these different disciplines really bring a different perspective, and I think it's a really healthy discussion we're having. So anyhow, thanks to all.
Yeah.
Diane, other policy things, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. Just a couple things on the highlights, which start on page 73. It recaps the work since the last commission meeting. A few things we're looking at Senate Bill 87, watching it. It deals with 1863-12 child pornography, passed the Senate. It's in the House Judiciary Committee. It requires a grade increase and a sentencing enhancement if a child is under age 10. So the bill itself is in the supplemental materials on page 90, and a summary is on page 97. So stay tuned for Amendment 7, probably, of the sentencing guidelines. Specifically, I'm going to call attention to the annual report. We changed the structure of the data tables to make them a little bit more meaningful. And while we wrote the text and created all the graphics and tables, Amy Zimmerman in House Publications Department this year did all the formatting. It looks great, and we really appreciate her work. And we also want to thank the House Print Shop for printing a limited number of the copies of the report and mailing some of those. So it's currently online, and it should be in your mailbox shortly, and we'll be starting the 2020 report. As far as the compliance data, I wanted to give a little bit of background how we go about that. As Mark said, the official certification begins with the 2021 data, but we did analysis on 2019, and we're going to start the analysis on 2020. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. So first, we ascertain the cases that are not in SGS Web through a comparison with the AOPC database on OTN, so strictly on the OTN. Then Christy takes that list and pings it against SGS Web for a status. Sometimes the cases are not there at all. As Judge Tucker mentioned, a lot of times they're completed, if somebody just did not hit the submit button, or sometimes they're partially completed. And we take all that, compile it with that status report and give it to all judges. And Education Outreach goes out and works with all the counties on that. So the counties have a chance to submit any missing cases before we close out that data year and we compile those reports that we did for 2019. We requested and obtained data from AOPC and DOC that has been coded and formatted, and we use that data in impact analyses, research studies, and the projections. And last, just a reminder that we did approve for purposes of public comment the draft state parole guidelines and state parole recommitment ranges. We held public hearings on those, but we tabled those pending some decisions by DOC and the parole board. The strong R assessment slated to replace the LSIR assessment, and the guidelines were developed based on the LSIR, and we need to have a validated instrument to use in the guidelines. And I think that wraps up my summary.
Hey, thanks very much, Diane. One final policy thing, and it really gets it back to Representative Stevens to close things out. But our next meeting is scheduled for June 10th. It'll be the same kind of format, a Zoom webinar. And at that point, the commission can think about or decide how we want to proceed moving forward in terms of the other 2 quarterly meetings. One thing that I think staff would recommend is we're gaining a lot in terms of having a Zoom webinar meeting that we can now live stream, but also make available otherwise and have people participate remotely without showing up on a site. So we hope that at the very least, we think about sort of a hybrid approach in the future. But if there is an interest or need to having in-person meetings, the sooner we decide that, the better, because we'll have to go back to that old world of like making reservations and getting rooms and thinking like that. So, so that's on the agenda for the next meeting. And rest assured that for the balance of the year, we'll make sure we have the Zoom capability so we can always fall back on that. So with that, I'll turn it to the chairman. Thanks.
All right, we're back. It's 1:04, so we got pretty close to back on track here. That's great. I appreciate staff, working through their remarks, and I certainly won't make it longer here. Anything else to add? Anybody have any new business to discuss or anything that we haven't covered? All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's participation. Thank you as always, and we will be. We'll see you again in June. As Mark said, it'll be a Zoom meeting, and then we'll have a pretty thorough discussion about what we do moving forward. Hopefully, by then we'll have a lot more relief from this COVID world we've been living in. So, stay safe, everybody, and thanks so much for being here today and participating. Take care.
Thank you all.
Sure.